Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, they're gone.
They're invisible. It's a whole different day for me.
The butthole
Really, I have
hat
a
was an
different shirt
invisibility
on.
cloak.
I have a different shirt and my hair is different, so obviously
I totally didn't get the memo.
I also have
I'm wearing
a
the same
different butthole hat on.
thing.
Can I need to see, can we
This is when we get banned.
Right.
This is it. Every episode, increasingly, I'm like, this is it. This is the one where we get banned. So
no,
hello,
in
everyone.
reality, my dog was freaking out because he was digging in the couch cushion at a chew stick, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to go get that for him so he stops flipping out.
Fair enough.
That's fine. Understandable. So hello, welcome back.
Hello.
For everyone tuning in, or for audio listeners, this is a continuation of our last episode, I guess. It's a new episode, but we are joined by Callie Wright. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
Anytime. So last episode, we kind of went into Callie's story and their experience transitioning and sort of processing a lot.
All the things.
It's a very, very accurate way to put that. Processing a lot.
A little bit of everything. And the episode ended with Callie saying that they were going to sort of turn the table and ask me some pressing questions. So
Yes, I want to ask
Now
some
the
pressing questions.
turntables have turned.
Yes. Because I think what you were talking about like not liking penetrative sex and how specifically that it bothers you that's like the center of everything, right?
Mhm.
I think that frankly, societally, we have a really fucking boring idea of what sex actually is. And I think it is a common experience that you would say, I'm not really into penetrative sex. And somebody would say, what other kind of sex is there? What
Yeah.
do you like then?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So first of all, that fucking sucks. Because like, so I often have this experience where I'm talking to someone and I'm like, okay, I want to come tonight. Can we make this happen?
Yeah.
So we have the back and forth and we're talking about things, and then I am not 100% against penetrative sex necessarily. It's just I don't want to do that first and foremost. Like if I'm with somebody sort of regularly and I'm comfortable with them, then yeah, we can explore different things. But if I'm just looking to like, I can't relax with someone that I just met enough to be fucked in the ass, or like I just because I'm not like aroused by the idea of fucking somebody else in the ass. Like I just don't want to. I don't want that to be the focus. Like I would rather just hang out with somebody and then maybe come. And it sucks when a conversation just immediately ends because I won't let them fuck me, like in the traditional sense. And I guess it's fine if that's something that they need and I'm not able to provide it. Like that's fine, and I think it's great that they're able to withdraw consent for an experience, all of that. But like sometimes people are just so assumptive, and like you said, they're like, oh well, what else would we do? And I'm
Right.
like, well, I can pull out a list, but like literally anything else, like. And it doesn't process. It's like does not compute, and they're just sitting there like in twitching, and there's like a glitch and sparks and everything. It's like I broke them because all that they can think of is okay, dick, ass, boom, like that's it. And that's really the major qualm that I have.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, like that is a gift that I have gotten from diving a lot more deeply into like queer theory and queer culture and polyamory is like learning that sex is a whole lot more than just like somebody sticking something in somebody else of one variety or another, right? And like, I mean, I say that as a person who like really enjoys that kind of sex, but I would also get bored if that's literally all there was. um and you know, I think for me it's just intimacy that like feels good in a special way that other intimacy doesn't. Like it's a very nebulous thing to me, like what that even looks like, right? Especially because like I hook up with other trans people who have different varying feelings about their genitalia. Like they might be really really into a very specific kind of sex act that may or may not have to do with their genitalia, or they may have like very specific ways that they want their genitalia to be interacted with. um and I think honestly, what makes it the most pleasurable for me is like what I've learned about like about like setting boundaries and asking for consent and that kind of stuff. Because like doing that all up front, what you're really saying is like, I am communicating to you the best ways to take care of me, and you are communicating to you the best ways to take care of you, in these super intimate ways that are like much deeper than like, oh, I'm going through a hard time, how can I support you? Like that matters, obviously, but like when you're interacting with somebody else's body, that's like super super intimate in ways that a lot of other things are not. Um, and I find that I think what it turns out to be for me is that like the mechanics of physical sexual pleasure are great and like that's fun, but what really creates a satisfying sexual experience is like that sort of emotional intimacy that comes with it. Even if it's a one night stand, even if it's a hookup, if it's not somebody that I feel a particular emotional connection to, it's still just like in that moment, like I want to have a conversation with you about how you like to be touched, because it's really important for me that you feel good about this experience and that I feel good about this experience and that like we have a good time. And especially if I'm talking to somebody who I know has complicated feelings about their body, like I obviously I don't want to fuck with any of that. Um, and I feel like that's just such a, to me, that's just that it just feels very normal to conceptualize sex in that way now. But I also feel like, I don't know, to like mainstream culture, that's such a radical idea that sex can be something different. And I think even among a lot of queer people, it still feels that way. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I was very interested to hear you say that and sort of unpack more of your experience with that. And so like, are you okay being more specific? Like what do you, because again, I'm like playing the very, very ignorant person. Like, well, you don't want penetrative sex, but you want to come. So what are we gonna do? Like, obviously, oral sex and like mutual masturbation, like those are things. But like, I mean, what do you look for in a sexual experience like that?
I mean, well, those two things sound great.
Yeah.
But like for me, so and I've had this conversation with Chris before on some previous episodes. Like I'm all about the foreplay,
Yeah.
and I also really like kind of like what you were talking about, that sort of emotional connection and kind of like leading up to the orgasm is more exciting to me than the orgasm itself, so to speak. It's like going up the hill on the roller coaster before going down is very exciting, terrifying but exciting, and uh, I like that kind of thing. And so in like a sexual encounter, um, that sounds like a sci-fi film. Like an encounter of the fourth kind. But in a sexual encounter, I just get kind of bored with the idea of people just like showing up or me showing up and then just immediately boom, and then all right, fuck, come, done, and then all right, bye. Like it's like what did we do here? Like
Right.
what did we accomplish here that you couldn't have accomplished on your own in 2 seconds in the bathroom? Like why was I required for
Wait,
this?
are there people who can do it that fast?
I mean,
Twice. No,
apparently
no,
Chris.
no,
It
no.
takes me
Wow.
hours.
Okay. All right. Damn. All right.
Well, like
Jealous. Very
it's just
jealous.
like it seems almost like we've almost commodified sex or made it like this hyper efficient means to some kind of end, and it's like, why can't it be some kind of a journey or an exploration without it needing to accomplish a specific thing? And that's coming from somebody who also has used sex as a commodified way to access an orgasm. Like, I am also part of the problem, but
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's a difference between like, they're like, obviously people enjoy a lot of different things a lot of different ways, but I think it's different when one specific thing is like the overriding cultural expectation and that doesn't fit what you're into. Like it can kind of feel like you're being smothered a little bit.
yeah, and that's the main problem, I guess. And uh like, Chris, you're making a lot of face.
There's a lot of threads here that, like, I mean, no, what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I just my opinions on the matter are that we've commodified sex because it helps humans cope with that being lonely. Like, like I'm independent. I don't want anybody. I'm single, but I need to get my rocks off. So I've got to do it with somebody else. It's like eating alone. Like, people are fucking weird about eating alone, but you eat alone all the time at home. You masturbate all the time at home, but it's nice to do it with somebody else. So there's that loneliness thread. There's that portion of it. There's there's a lot. That's my main one. It's just that people don't want to be alone, so that's why they feel they have to do it with somebody else. But they don't have to. Love yourself, love your body, explore yourself. But it's also another thing about it is that sex obviously isn't just about penetration for them. It's about either a need to assert their dominance or to be dominated. Perhaps that's not even necessarily true, and that's not even necessarily about the penis and the vagina or the butthole.
Huh?
There's a lot of it. There's a whole lot. I'm not the news. I'm the Daily Show. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think for me, I feel very fortunate in that I am just like not super picky, honestly. Like I really enjoy having sex, and if it turns out that it's just the very mechanical, physical kind of sex that doesn't have feelings attached, like I won't have sex with anybody without having a boundaries conversation, at least a very basic boundaries conversation, because I think that's really important. Even in like quote unquote vanilla sex, I just think it's very, very important to have just the most basic boundaries situation conversation with people, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and that can still be fun. But I very much more enjoy, even if it's a random person that I'm hooking up with, for there to be at least like a little bit more of a deeper connection than that. Because for me, it really is like intimacy and the physical pleasure of things. It's like a 50-50 split for me on like what's important in sex. And I love I hooked up with this dude at a con, and we spent probably 10 or 15 minutes talking about boundaries. Like, what's hot for you? Like, what do you like? How do you like to be touched? That kind of and I thought like it was so fucking cool. First of all, because like, no offense, I felt a little surprised that I was with a cis guy that was like that worried about having that. He was equally as into having that boundaries conversation as I was. And on the rare occasions when I have hooked up with cis guys before, often that conversation is treated as a like, okay, I know we need to do this, but it's a little silly that we're doing it kind of thing, and it was cool. And who knows if I will ever even meet him again in my life. You know what I mean? But there was still a level of intimacy there that was about more than like we're touching each other's genitals and we're fucking and stuff. And that's like, those experiences are always way more fun for me.
I will say that I'm very excited for a time in the future in which I can stop being impressed when somebody cares to have that conversation. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And I hate it when like I'm meeting with somebody and then they're like, okay, now I just want to make sure that you're comfortable. What do you like? What are your boundaries? Things like that. When they do that, it's like, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you so much. Like, why? Like, why can't that be the norm?
Well, I
So
think there's a lot to be said for the fact that like the reason why a lot of people have really fucked up relationships with sex is because of the especially puritanical way our culture treats sex.
Yeah.
You know, I have had to do, even as someone who had a relatively open upbringing. Like my mom had the sex talk with me pretty early, and I feel like, looking back on it, I mean, I was fucking like 13 and it felt very awkward, but like remembering the conversation now, I felt like she did a mostly pretty good job of explaining stuff. And obviously at 14, she was having the conversation with me in the context of like, well, you're a boy, and so here are things you need to know as a boy. But I felt like she did a really good job of explaining about like how you want to like, consent is important and boundaries are important and that kind of stuff. But like, even with that, I just had so much bullshit to unpack around sex before it was able to actually be fun for me.
So that touches on something I want to talk about in the previous episode, is that that's why penetrative sex is so ingrained in us as like the end all be all, and that's where you need to go, because that's what the birds and bees conversation is like.
Yes.
It's not like and so you want to make sure that the knot is secure but also safe to get out of. Like that's not part of the birds and bees conversation. Like it's not talking about what safe wax is or safe word.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just about just how to procreate is the end of that conversation. Like that's one reason. Another thing that I thought about again, I couldn't really bring it up, but in the last time we recorded, moments ago for us, is that you talked about how you're supposed to live this life of service in others, but you don't think about taking care of yourself. Having kids, I've realized that I have to train them to take care of other people and take care of their family and not live for themselves, because kids are selfish. But eventually I need to alter that conversation to make sure you take time for yourself and healing, and you can't keep giving if you've got nothing left to give. Make sure you're good. But kids are fucking selfish, and so you have to teach them to make sure they're taking care of their neighbor and taking care of their family. But you can drill that message too much. So
yeah,
watch birds and bees conversations and teach them how to care for themselves and others.
Well, and I think a lot of that also depends on the different ways in which people are socialized. And I mean, bringing it back to how like everything in our culture is gendered, right? Like there are very specific ways that that men are generally socialized to be in service to other people, and also socialized very directly to believe that they are entitled to the service of others, right? And that's like the conversation that happens a lot in feminist spaces, but you don't hear in the mainstream because people don't want to believe it's true, is that like that is the way in which misogyny hurts men also. The idea that women are less than, and like that has a knock-on effect that is harmful to men as well. And that's something that's like it's very, very much part of feminist theory. It's just not a thing that people like to talk about, because they would love to just say that like feminism is about hating men. But part of the way that men are denied access to themselves is that eventually you are taught that it's like, it's not okay to feel feelings. It's not okay to be sensitive. It's not okay to be intimate in any way with, anyone who is not your wife. And, taught to, suppress all of those things. But also a very, very strong cultural notion that like society largely exists to benefit you. And I think that, I mean, that's the reason why. And I mean, I feel like any man that I have in my social circle and interact with with any regularity, I feel like has done lots of work unpacking that, because I can't fucking stand or be around men who haven't, frankly. But like that is, I mean, that's a social barrier to overcome, and that it's a thing that we don't like, because I do think it's really important to talk about the ways in which misogyny directly harms women, but I think it harms everyone in certain ways. And it's, there's nuance to that conversation. Just like, you don't have to be gay to be hurt by homophobia, right? You just have to be perceived and to be in some proximity to gayness, to be hurt for be hurt by homophobia. But of course, if you say that, you risk taking attention away from like the most hurt group. And so there's like nuance that has to happen there. But yeah, it's hard.
It's basically what my point is that the lessons that are still drive mainstream society are the ones that they are preaching from a very early age. Like in it's I always bring it to the how to train an elephant. Like when an elephant's born, when they're born in captivity, they just tie a rope around its tiny little elephant foot, and it can't break away from that little rope. As it gets older, they just keep that same rope on it, and it's a massive elephant now, and it can easily snap that rope. But it has learned from a young age that I can't break free from the rope, so I don't even try.
Yeah,
so it's just that conditioning that we all have to work through and get through. Whatever your rope is, figure that shit out and break free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and figuring out that it's there in the first place is such a fucking battle before you even like begin to unpack it. It took me until I was almost 30 to get over what I would say is probably the biggest one in my life, but the gender stuff. And that kind of opened the floodgates to everything else, because I was not, accessing so much of what was important to me about myself. And then there's the sunk cost fallacy of like, once you realize that, it's like, oh fuck, my entire life's been a waste.
Right. If this is true, what else? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's all. Sorry to completely derail it.
I don't think that was a complete derailment at all. I think that was entirely relevant. Like that made a ton of sense. And I mean, if people, speaking about elephants, if we want to address the elephant in the room,
elephant.
It is a very specific brand of evangelical Christianity that is kind of at the root of most of that, right? The idea that you have to be apart and separate from your community, that whatever family you have, mom, dad, 2.5 kids, whatever, that is the aspiration, the goal, the entire thing that society is centered around, as opposed to centering society around, a broader community of people, which if you look at basically every other human culture that's existed, they have very specifically been organized largely into communities of one kind or another, as opposed to these like separate and discrete family units. And that is the way that hegemony perpetuates itself, because it separates us from our power by separating us from community.
Yes, Chris.
Well, hegemony?
Oh, that's like the dominant power that keeps everything the same. Let me look up the actual definition. Leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others.
Hegemony. All right.
Hegemony cricket.
Yeah. It's one of those fancy sounding academic words that I've taken into my vocabulary. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
we learn all kinds of things here.
Yeah. I just want to, thanks.
The more you know. So yeah, and that's, I don't know, that's I brought religion into the conversation, which
it comes up a lot actually. It's
does it? Okay, that's good.
It's because when these conversations, and this is a podcast about love, sex, and relationships, and you can't talk about love, you can't talk about sex, you can't talk about relationships unless we talk about these traditional ideas that form them. And religion is so powerful in how it's ingrained in us. It's part of our culture. It's part of our communities. It's part of our families. Chris was talking about how these are ideas that are ingrained in children at a young age. If there's one force I can think of that's probably the most powerful thing that is ingrained in people at a young age, it's religion. And coming out of the closet was easier for me than coming out as I said atheist at the time. I didn't realize that agnosticism existed, but that's how powerful of a force it was, at least for me. So I can only imagine for other people who have even.
Yeah, that's a common thing
families.
that's a common thing that people say. I have one friend I'm thinking of in specifically who said that coming out as gay to his like Baptist preacher dad or whatever was actually like, I guess in like whatever specific brand of Baptist church they have, they really don't care. Like you're still supposed to adhere to the same like sort of puritanical notions of sexuality, like chastity before marriage and like all of that stuff. But he said, he came out as gay to his dad when he was like super, super young, and then as like someone like approaching like middle and older age was still terrified to tell his dad that he was an atheist. So yeah, that's not I mean, I don't have numbers to say exactly how common it is, but as someone who lives in the queer world and the atheist world, certainly not an uncommon thing that I've run into.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird because it's almost like a trope or a cliche at this point, but I feel like religion is oftentimes, in the conversations that I've had with queer individuals, it's been a part of that, whether it's a part of their coming out story or a part of them struggling with identity.
In any Christian religion type that I've come across, it's a big message that is touted often, that you love God first. First, and then family somewhere after that. It's always that guy first, number one.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, specifically right. A guy, of course.
I
did
that on purpose. Yeah, Sky Daddy. Yeah.
I mean, maybe if I wasn't told to love a man at a young age, I wouldn't have turned out like this.
Right. It's always about that motherfucker first.
Although I do think it's important. This is a soapbox that I've gotten on a couple of times, because I got my start in I gave like the very, very abbreviated version of like how I started podcasting, and how I started, like the slightly longer version of that is that I started as an atheist podcaster. And I specifically, my show used to be called The Gaytheist Manifesto, and it was like very specifically a response that there were not a lot of trans voices in the atheist movement at the time. There was one person who was doing convention talks and stuff like that. And she appeared on a podcast occasionally. And I was looking, and I was able to find, I think, 2 trans people who were hosting podcasts. And I think at one time I looked, and it was like somebody who had made a couple episodes and then stopped making it. So there was like one active trans podcaster that I could find, and one person who like did convention talks sometimes and occasionally appeared on a podcast. And when I came out, I had some experiences in the queer community here that were like, felt pretty hostile to me as someone who was an atheist. And then I saw, like a lack of people like me in the atheist movement. And I was like, I am a fan of podcasts. Maybe I should make one of those. And so I like very much existed in that world for a long time. And, it's as messy a community as any other, maybe more so. I don't know. That's like a pissing contest I'm not super interested in adjudicating, but, suffice it to say, it has a lot of the same problems a lot of other communities do, of like, powerful, charismatic white men at the head of things who can get away with doing whatever they want because people think they're heroes, and a lot of bad behavior got swept under the rug. But all that's to say, I think we often treat religion as a boogeyman when what we really mean is Christianity or Abrahamic religion. Because I think, there are plenty of spiritual traditions that I think are not inherently hostile to queerness or transness. As someone who was an atheist myself, like I equally don't believe in those, but I do think it's important to sort of like name and be specific about where things, because I don't think you can meaningfully talk about religion as if it is any one thing with a singular effect on the world, because there were plenty of different spiritual traditions that didn't end in like colonization and the near destruction of the planet, and like all of the other things that a specific brand of evangelical Christianity, or in some places Islam. I think it's just important to like name specifics about where the problems lie and where those traditions are, and that's not to like make saints out of any other, because I mean there are Buddhists who do terrorism and Hindus who do terrorism. You don't hear about them as much because they're certainly smaller in number, and of course, as generally speaking, in the United States, those things are treated as a monolith. And things that don't quite matter as much on the other side of the world, because we would just rather like lump all those things together and set them aside. But yeah, that's just
they don't have oil for us to steal.
Yeah. There's that too.
I think the issue is more so with maybe not necessarily religion, but I would lump all of them together under the phrase like organized religion, but with like the specific idea of organized religion that has rules about how to love, how to have a relationship, how to have sex. Like that specifically. Whether it's positive and whether I agree with it or not, I don't think that we should put these hard rules that specify like how people explore those things. And I think that organized religion just has a habit of doing that. Like I don't think I know of any large-scale organized religion that doesn't have some kind of like tradition or like expectation when it comes to how to love, how to be in a relationship, or how to have sex.
Yeah, I mean, I'm specific of basically any philosophy that has a whole lot of thou shalts or like something like that. Especially, sorry, go ahead.
Like anything else, it needs resources to survive. And religion's resources are people. And to make people, you have to have a sex in a certain way. So that's why they have to have that conversation. And they're like, I need you to keep talking about this and tell it to your children. So they'll tell it to their children and giving us money.
Well, right. I think it's a lot about preservation of power, right? Like you see that in how the early Catholic Church operated, and how, like if I'm remembering my history right, like there was a period of time where like the average person wasn't able to read the Bible, like they just had to take the priest's word for what was in it. You know what I mean? And like those things are like very obviously ways to consolidate and preserve power, not anything having to do with human flourishing of any kind.
Right.
And so, I'm suspicious of any philosophy that sort of operates in that way, if that makes sense. I've met people from other spiritual traditions that it's like, oh, like it's literally the foundational nature of like what I believe about the universe, that like people are supposed to be able to do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting other people. And of course that can mean a lot of different things, because Christians would say, specifically like the right-wing Christians who like want people like us dead, would say that's what they're doing. And I that obviously just has to do with their prioritizing, like, me being unhappy and hating myself in this life is not actually a problem as long as I end up in heaven. Those kinds of philosophies I generally look at with skepticism, but I also think it's just like, I don't know, it's important to contextualize that in terms of where the power lies. That's why I kind of look askance at so much of American style atheism that just like comes down so hard on Islam. Because it's like a lot of it is just so xenophobic and so racist. And it's just a convenient way to cloud xenophobia and racism, when it's like we really should just be more concentrated on interrogating the power structures that exist in the United States, in name evangelical Christianity, and the harm that is like very obviously doing in the place that you live, among the people that you are. And it's interesting who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't, right? Because
Sure.
everybody's like, oh yeah, like I'm an atheist, I think it's all bullshit, but like my dad's a Baptist pastor and he's a good guy. But like that, you'll find that same person saying things that imply like every Muslim is a terrorist because Islam is inherently this one thing. And it's like, there's a reason you give that benefit of the doubt to Christianity that you don't give to Islam. And it's very clearly xenophobia or racism, And so I think it's also important to interrogate those kinds of things too. Like, who has the power, and especially who has the power, like where you live, over the marginalized groups sort of in your sphere.
Yeah.
Is that a mic drop moment? Maybe there's some silence. So I was just like,
well, yeah. What a journey we have been on.
Yeah, we've gone some places.
We have. Wait a minute. Okay, so this says live 1 hour 49 minutes and 50 seconds. Is that since we switched?
No.
Or is that the okay? I was gonna say, holy shit, have we? That's why. No. Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay,
right.
Yeah, this is total
Tabs on the whole thing.
Yeah,
good. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we've got ourselves to a nice little point here.
Yeah, we've got elephants is the what I took out of all of this is to
42,
specify, not just
42.
elephants.
That's what it comes down to. 42.
Yeah,
it's the answer to everything.
Answer the question of life, the universe, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate question.
The ultimate question. Yes, thank you.
My question is, what is the ultimate question?
Well, we're gonna need like 1 million years or something, and
Yeah.
a whole new computer to answer that question.
Yep.
There are probably people
we need
listening to
mice.
this who have. There are probably people listening to this who have no idea what we're talking about.
But there's quite a few who are like, yeah, dolphins and towels. Let's go.
Of course, yes. So long and thanks for all the fish. So that it should come to this. We tried to warn you all, but oh dear.
That's if we want to talk about. I know that you said you don't want to hash out the whole like what's the best sci-fi whatever, but Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, so good. So to be clear, I'm not interested in the silly Star Wars versus Star Trek debate.
It's like comparing apples and avocados. They're two different things.
I don't even care if they're the same. I don't care to debate over them. Star Trek is like my entire life. I enjoy Star Wars. And I am very, very glad for my friends for whom Star Wars is their entire life. Like, it's the silliest debate. I love that my friends have things that they like, and sometimes those things are Star Wars. When I was a kid, I loved having those debates. Now, I am very, very glad to have a discussion comparing and contrasting and talking about the reasons why I personally like one thing more than another. But I'm just so over the idea that I have to convince someone that they're wrong about a thing they like. It's silly.
Yeah.
And so all that's to say that, yes, Hitchhiker's Guide is, I'm all the way with you.
I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like the creme de la creme. It's like chef's kiss. Love it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I like Star Trek better, but strangely, I also believe that you can like Hitchhiker's Guide more than Star Trek and we can still be friends. It's weird. It's a weird concept.
Sorry.
We don't believe in extremist views here. We're gonna have to we're gonna have to kick you out. It's just
there's gonna be a tweet thread waiting on me when we're done. I'm gonna be bullied off the internet. It's fine. Come at me.
But so we did this last time. I guess we can do it this time. What are our moral of the stories?
Oh man. I mean, I think sort of an overarching moral that maybe catches the 2 or 3 discrete conversations we've had in the course of all this is that like shit is really complicated. And I think the first step is just really embracing that everything is so much more complicated than you imagine it to be. And anything, especially if you've not already done a ton of work in unpacking the culture that you've grown up in, a whole lot of your assumptions and a whole lot of your defaults are probably wrong. And a whole lot of the things that you think of as the status quo are probably not actually good or healthy. And that it's really, really important to interrogate all of those things in an honest way with the help of a therapist if you have access to one. And again, if you ask yourself these questions and you come down firmly on the side of the status quo, maybe ask yourself that question 2 or 3 times again. And if you do come to the same place, it's fine. But I would, again, just say be suspicious of getting comfortable in like, oh yeah, everything I grew up with makes total sense. Because spoiler alert, that's rarely the case.
Yeah. My moral would be that, your answers are not anybody else's answers. You can't copy off somebody else's test because it's.
I mean, I can, but that's fine.
I mean, sure. To the you can I cast aspersions, not cast aspersions, but I guess doubt those who have very firm beliefs on those who you haven't moved out of your hometown and you've never traveled or lived anywhere else, and this is your whole bubble. You probably need a little bit better worldview. You can absolutely be an educated and brilliant person, but I really have to dig deep and double check and examine where you're coming from if you haven't really experienced the world.
Yeah, if you have an internet connection, there's no excuse.
Man,
you don't have to have the money to travel. All you have to do is be able to get on the internet.
Do your own research. Yeah.
Except when it comes to viruses.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Not that way. Not that way.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so hard about coming up with a moral of the story, right? It's because like there are caveats and exceptions to everything. Yeah. Because there are certain things that I am very firm and immovable on, and I will absolutely say, like, if you do not believe this, you are wrong. And those are things like the way that I feel about structural racism, structural transphobia, structural misogyny, those kinds of things. That sort of stuff I'm like very, very firm on. But when we're talking about like finding your way through life in ways that don't lead you to visit oppression on other people.
Stephen, what do you got?
I think you guys summed it up pretty nicely. I feel like I really liked your imagery with the elephant and the rope, and
yeah, that was great.
Like, kind of believing that something has more power than it has, and sort of growing out of that and having to acknowledge that that's there and break out of that. It's beautiful stuff, poetic. I love it. So just remember, always remember that you can learn from the pachyderm.
Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good. Also, don't feel like you're a failure if that terrifies you, because it makes a whole lot of sense for it to be terrifying. But like, I can promise that like on the other side of that scary stuff, there's just like a whole new world.
It's okay to be out of your comfort zone.
Good, in fact, in many cases.
All right. Well, I love you both very, very much.
Wow.
Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers so much for your time and your attention. And Stephen, you want to hit him with the... Oh, wait, first off, Callie, could you give your podcast another shameless plug?
Absolutely. My podcast is called Queersplaining. I am at Callie Gets It on Twitter, and you can find Queersplaining. Should be able to find it anywhere you currently listen to podcasts. And if you don't currently listen to podcasts, you're probably not hearing this. So
there's reason to believe.
Oh, here I am making assumptions again, but I think that's a fair one.
And Stephen, hit him with our shameless plugs.
Oh God. What have I done?
We
I'm
have
broke.
robbed him of his ability to
I'm
speak.
sorry. I wasn't ready. I should have been ready, but I wasn't ready. But if you would like to contribute to my ability to be more ready in the future, then visit mtfproductions.com/donate. Yeah, that's all I got.
That was a brilliant transition
It was a
into
good
that. Very
save.
nicely done.
Fantastic save, yeah.
I
Well
like
done.
to fall, but then catch myself, so it looks like I'm dancing, but I'm actually just
Absolutely.
falling the entire
You
time.
fall with grace.
great. Yep.
Fall with grace.
Fallen with style.
Yeah. Yeah. There it is.
Oh yeah.
Oh, hold on.
He's got it.
I'm better with this hand.
There,
I can
boom.
do it with this hand. I can't do it on my right hand.
Boop, boop. All right. Be good, friends.
All right, are we doing post show?
Absolutely. Let's do a
Okay.
post wrap up.
All right. So anyone who's tuning in live, just stay tuned. We're gonna have a post show where we can just kind of chill and hang out.
If you're listening after the fact, you could have tuned into the after show if you were listening live and watching live on Twitch and on Facebook and on YouTube. And also, eventually we'll have a Patreon where we'll have a little bit of unlockables, and this might be on it. So
Unlockables. Okay.
Unlockables.
That's tapping into the gamer in me. Oh my god.
oh my goodness, unlockables,
I was gonna say, speaking of things you like having during sex.
unlockables.
Oh.
All right.
And
Love you
I'll
all.
get into that in the post show. All right. I'll see you all on the flip side. Love, love, love.